Hi everyone and welcome. I'm Jessica Ng. I'll be your host today, and I'm so excited to be part of this webinar and helping all of us to be everyday innovators. Before we get started, I just have a few quick housekeeping items to go over. You'll notice that you are in listen-only mode. However, we still would love to hear from you. So please use the chat box to ask questions or make comments. We'll try to free up some time at the end to address any questions that come in throughout the session. Well, we also would encourage you to make comments and share your learnings from today on social media using the hashtag Allegra Innovate. And most importantly, we will be recording today's session, and we will be emailing you a link to the recorded session later this week. Feel free to share that link with friends, families, or other colleagues. So Allegra Marketing Print Mail is proud to be bringing you this live webinar today. I'd like to thank all of our existing customers who are joining us for today's session from all different types of industries, including education, financial, nonprofit organizations, healthcare, and more. Regardless of your industry or your role in your organization, I'm confident you're going to find great value from today's message. Thank you again for your partnership and your loyalty. For those who haven't used Allegra before, let me give you a quick overview of who we are and how we might be able to help you. Allegra is all about empowering our clients' success. We come up with innovative solutions to help solve business and marketing challenges. The local Allegra teams across North America provide unparalleled service and expertise and can tap into the resources and the tools across our large network to deliver out-of-the-box solutions and results. So whether you need graphic design, printing, signage, promotional products, website design, or marketing strategy, we'll find the right solution to help you achieve your goals. We're very excited to be sharing some of these innovative ideas with you today and look forward to collaborating with you in the future. So now let's get on with the show. It's my honor to introduce our incredible speaker for today's webinar. Josh Linkner has been the founder and CEO of 4 tech companies, which sold for a combined value of over $200 million. He's the author of 2 New York Times bestsellers, Disciplined Dreaming and The Road to Reinvention. He has invested in and/or mentored over 100 startups and is the founding partner of Detroit Venture Partners. Today, Josh serves as chairman and co-founder of both Fuel Leadership and the Institute for Applied Creativity. He has twice been named the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year and is a President Barack Obama Champion of Change Award recipient. He's a regular columnist for Forbes, the Detroit Free Press, and Inc. magazine. Josh is also a passionate Detroiter, the father of 4, and is a professional level jazz guitarist. We're certainly thrilled to have him here with us today. So welcome, Josh.
Well, thank you so much. It's a delight to be here, and welcome to all of the hundreds of people on the line today and those that will get to listen in afterward. Like you, I'm a passionate business person, and I love building and growing things, and I know that's certainly in the spirit of Allegra. So we're going to have a lot of fun today. We're going to dive in and take a look at some practical ways to fuel growth and innovation in your businesses. One thing, just a quick reminder as we explore this notion of everyday innovation, as you're listening along, please don't forget the hashtag on Twitter or social media, Allegra Innovate, hashtag Allegra Innovate, so you can join the conversation. What I'm hoping to do today is share with you some fresh approaches that you can immediately put into action to drive growth, innovation, and transformation, both personally and professionally. To begin, quick story. So like many of you, I started my business with my bare hands. I've now built and sold 5 companies. And the entrepreneurial process is never easy. We always run into obstacles and challenges and setbacks. But these types of principles of being innovative may actually help carry the day. They may help level the playing field if you're in a smaller organization as you compete with larger ones. Quick example. This is the picture of the company that I built most recently. I started in 1999, called ePrize. We designed, built, and ran online promotions over time for large brand advertisers, kind of like half ad agency and half software company. But despite our success, grateful for that, we had a lot of challenges along the way. First of all, I'm from Detroit, not exactly the tech hub of our country, and we were understaffed and undercapitalized, generally under-resourced the entire way. What allowed us to win, though, is we embraced this notion of everyday innovation. We injected innovation far beyond the services that we delivered. It was part of who we are. It became a daily habit. A quick example of that type of thinking in action, by the way, early on we had the chance to win some business from a large company called Conagra Foods. They're a huge food company, and they were looking to consolidate all of their type of work that we did, digital promotions, to a single supplier. And it was a tough fought battle. There were ultimately 3 competitors. And what allowed us ultimately to win the deal, which ended up to be $30 million, is that we took a totally non-traditional approach. In other words, all the other competitors went in one direction, we went in the opposite. So whether you're out on the front lines trying to win a deal or delight a customer or recruit new team members, this type of innovative thinking, in our case, was the fuel for our success, and I believe it can be for yours as well. So I'll give you an example of how this type of thing might play out. I'm actually headed off to Philadelphia later today, and in Philadelphia, there is a restaurant called Barclay Prime. Now, it opened up, and it was a beautiful steakhouse. Only problem is, as you may know, restaurants are tough business. Something like 80% of all new restaurants close within the first 3 years. You've got difficult, slim margins, you have spoilage, you have employee issues, and it's very, very difficult to compete and stand out with the competitive set. And that was the same challenge that Barclay Prime was about to have. I mean, yeah, they were great, but so were other many good steakhouses. So what did they do? They decided to embrace a sense of innovation to allow them to stand out from the competitive set. And to do that, they took on one of the most closely held traditions in the Philadelphia area, the Philly cheesesteak. Now, I don't know if you've been to Philly or not, but these are on like every corner. And this thing is sacred. I mean, the beautiful Philly cheesesteak, you might change the cheese a little bit, but pretty much it's about the same. They taste the same, they look the same, and they come for $5 with a set of fries. So what did Barclay Prime do? They looked at this tradition and said, maybe this is our opportunity to stand out. Maybe this is our opportunity to innovate. And so instead of adding a $5 cheesesteak to their menu, they decided to offer a $100 Philly cheesesteak. This crazy innovative cheesesteak sandwich. It's got seared foie gras, it's got Wagyu beef, comes with a half bottle of champagne. So the audacity to put this on the menu changed the game. Everyone in the community started talking about it. The local media covered it. In fact, it made international news. The late night comedians were making jokes about it. Celebrities, when visiting Philadelphia, decided to stop by and have a $100 Philly cheesesteak. It became a whole thing. So like on a company meeting, you might take a client out there and order one for the table. So everyone gets a little bite and gets a little story. Ironically, they don't even sell that many of them, but just the sheer nature of this disruptive idea, putting it on their menu, changed the game. Think about what it says about this little restaurant, that they're willing to do the never been done before. They're willing to be creative. They're pushing the boundaries of innovation. They care about quality. They celebrate the imagination. So even though that's only a small percentage of their revenue, Barclay Prime credits this one menu addition to their launch and ultimately their success, now 12 years in to their meteoric rise in the Philadelphia market. So these are the types of things I mean by everyday innovation. They are accessible to us all. They don't require a bunch of money or external resources. It's drawing on the internal sense of creativity, of innovation, of the imagination. So here's my suggestion to you, no matter what your business, no matter what your role. I believe that each of us need to embrace a new role, that of disruptor, of innovator, of business artist, of entrepreneur. These are the skills, these are the mindsets that allow us to win in these incredibly difficult and competitive times. And let's face it, the world we're living in today is very challenging. Today we live in a world of dizzying speed, exponential complexity, and ruthless competition. And the one thing we know for sure is that we can no longer simply rely on the models of the past and expect the same results. Today we need an entirely new and fresh approach to meeting the challenges that we face. So by embracing the sense of innovation, you might say, gosh, that sounds good, but I don't have a game-changing idea sitting around. If you have one, nothing wrong with that. But I would say this, take the weight of the world off your shoulders. Don't worry so much about the game changers. Instead, try to deploy your creativity to the notion of everyday innovation. It's the little stuff, those little opportunities for change, transformation. It could be something as small as how you run your Monday morning meeting, or how you prospect for a new client, or how you interact with a partner or a vendor. These are the things that allow us to soar, even though they may not make a cover of a magazine. And they're the things that I strongly recommend that you consider embracing. Now, in the last dozen or so years, I've had the privilege to write 3 books on this topic of disruptive creative thinking. And in doing so, I've had the chance to interview hundreds of thought leaders. I've interviewed CEOs and billionaires, many celebrity business leaders that you would know by name. But I've also interviewed artists and musicians and teachers and even hackers. These are the types of people that make a difference in our world. And here's the interesting thing. What I discovered across all these ages, genders, and geographies, turns out there are some very common patterns, common approaches of the most innovative people and the most innovative organizations. And that's exactly what I'm excited to share with you today. 5 big ideas, the 5 obsessions of innovators. As we attack them, I would encourage you to take an open mind and perhaps more importantly, an open heart, and think how you can inject these principles directly into your daily work to elevate your growth, to soar, to lead. So the first obsession of innovators, it's actually around curiosity. Turns out the more curious you are, the more creative you become. Now this may sound good, but how do you do it from a practical standpoint? Here's the challenge. Most of us make decisions, big and small, based on what worked or what didn't work in the past. If you lived in a static environment, that would be awesome. But today we live in a rate of change like none other in history. So those instincts can be misleading. Instead of leaping into something instinctively, try asking more questions. Anytime you can pause and ask questions about the problem that you're facing, about your proposed solution, you're going to find new possibilities. And ideally, you begin questions with why, what if, or why not. The thing is, when you ask these questions, it forces you to challenge conventional wisdom. It forces you to imagine what can be instead of just what already is. And that's exactly what happened with a woman named Jessica Mindrick. Now, Jessica had a small business. It was a jewelry business, but unfortunately, she was facing some steep declines. Her business was being outmaneuvered by competitors who were more innovative and had more funds and were better marketers. In fact, things got so bad, she was thinking about closing up shop altogether. But then she read an article. It was an article in the paper about a program hundreds of miles from her home in Newark, New Jersey, a program at the time being run by the mayor, Cory Booker. This program was a gun amnesty program, and the goal was to get guns off the streets. What they were doing is they were paying cash for firearms, no questions asked. Now, the article went on to say that the program was so successful, they actually ran into 2 problems. Number 1, they couldn't afford it anymore. They used all their money. They couldn't afford to keep buying the guns. Number 2, they were having a challenge storing all these firearms. Actually, storing them safely was becoming a real issue. So Jessica reads this article, and she could have glazed right past it, like most of us do when we see something outside of our field, outside of our hometown. But Jessica became curious. And she started thinking to herself, why, what if, and why not? What if this is an opportunity for me? What if I approach my jewelry business in a completely different way? So she ends up getting up the courage to call Mayor Cory Booker on the phone. She strikes a deal to buy the guns, melt them down, and make jewelry out of them. So Jessica launches the Caliber line of jewelry. Now in this example, you see this bracelet here. Well, the number at the top, that was the serial number of the firearm that was melted down to make the bracelet. Her business takes off. Everybody wants Caliber type jewelry. And so now what she does is she buys all these weapons from Newark and gives 20% of the proceeds back to Newark. So she's making a real impact in her community, or in this community outside of her hometown. And at the same time, she's launched a hell of a business. She's doing fantastically well. In fact, she's been so successful that they ran out of guns to buy in Newark. I told her to come to Detroit. We've got plenty of those firearms laying around in my hometown. But the point is, her curiosity led to a non-traditional approach and led to non-traditional success. And your curiosity can do just that. Question for you. Which organization do you think delivers the worst customer experience? Now, you might be thinking, okay, maybe it's the cable company or your phone company. But when most people are asked this question, they land on one most notorious company for terrible service, the DMV. Now, think about it. When you're going to get your tags renewed, you're already preparing for a soul-crushing experience. Unless you happen to be in a little suburb of Raleigh, North Carolina called Holly Springs. Now, the Holly Springs DMV is totally unlike anything you've ever seen. You walk into their DMV, the first thing you notice, fresh baked cupcakes. You're like, wait, what the heck is going on? So you're eating your cupcake. Well, maybe along with that, you'd like a cold pressed juice or a smoothie or dozens of varieties of coffees and exotic teas. There's fresh cut flowers. There's area rugs. There's soft seating. There's a children's play area to keep the little ones entertained. Every aspect of this DMV totally reimagined. Now, how could this be happening, you might wonder? Well, here's the story. A man named Chad Price really got curious. He got curious when the DMV in North Carolina decided to privatize. And he started thinking to himself, why? What if and why not? What if I took one of these DMVs over and completely did the opposite? What if I reimagined the experience? What if instead of offending customers, I delighted them? He thought that maybe he could expand his business. Well, the critics told him he was nuts. They said, listen, that's all creative, but the way you're paid is per transaction. You can't raise your fees, and there's only so many people that live in your geography. So the theory was that no matter what he did, you can't expand your market size. It's a fixed market size. But Chad's curiosity led to a different conclusion. He said, wow, maybe if I delighted my customers, more people would come. Today, people drive for up to 100 miles to get to his DMV. They drive right past 5 or 6 others along the way. The thinking is that the round trip time to their home is about the same, but they have so much better experience that it's worth it. So Chad is not only delighting his customers, he's doing double the revenue of any other DMV in the entire state. This is what happens when we get curious, when we challenge the underlying assumptions of our business, when we ask those tough questions, when we reimagine what can be, really the possibilities become limitless. Same thing that happened in the Children's Hospital at the University of Pittsburgh. The leaders of this hospital were trying to come up with a way to better serve their customers, which in their case are sick kids and their families. So what do they do? How do they do it? Well, they started asking questions. They got curious, and it led to a pretty cool idea. These are the window washers. So what happened is the idea came forward, and they called up the window cleaning company who happily paid for the uniforms. The cost of the hospital was zero. So now as they repel from the roof, they got to clean the windows anyway. No productivity is lost, but they also are entertaining the children. Game changer. Kids look forward to it for days. They forget why they were there in the first place. Takes the attention away from the medical care. So in this example, everybody wins. It's better for the kids, obviously. Better for the window washers who are now better serving their community. It's even better for the window washers who are now finding purpose and meaning in a previously mundane and boring job. This is what happens when we get curious. This is what happens when we embrace this notion of everyday innovation. And this type of thinking is accessible to us all. Okay, so this brings us to our second obsession of innovators in our quest for everyday innovation. Obsession number 2, it's a craving for what's next. It's an insatiable appetite for the future. And at the same time, it's a willingness to let go. Letting go of stuff is easy when it's not working out. But it's harder to let go of something that is successful in favor of what's possible. But I'll let you in on a little secret. Too often, we tend to overestimate the risk of trying something new, but we underestimate the risk of standing still. In other words, it's actually less risky at times to let go in favor of what you can do in the future. Now, many people would know this guy is affectionately known as Coach K. Now, Coach K, he's the #1 men's college basketball coach in history. He's won over 1,000 games. He does something pretty cool, though, that I wanted to share. After every single play, he's trained all the players out on the field and all those on the sidelines together. They all chant something out. It's like a mantra. And often the cameras will pick it up on cue. All together, after every single play, they all chant out, next play, next play, next play. The thinking is that no matter what just happened, good or bad, if the players are worried about that previous play, there's no way they can be fully engaged in the task at hand. So Coach K has trained his team to literally shed the past every 20 or 30 seconds, and he attributes much of their success to the willingness to let go. It's hard when we have a good quarter, we say, gosh, I don't want to change it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or if we have a bad quarter, we might say, well, now isn't the time to be innovative. But the best of the best, if we really want to seize our full potential, we need to crave what's next, and we need to be willing to let go. Next play. Next play. Here's a next play move for you. Idea Bank, a little bank in Poland. Well, they had an insight that sometimes their customers didn't even have time to get to an ATM machine. So they said, well, what if we had an ATM machine that could come to the customer? Here's what they did. They tricked out these BMW electric vehicles with a built-in ATM machine. Customers can order it with an Uber-like app. So you order the car on your mobile phone, you track it on the map just like an Uber, the car drives up, transact your business, car drives off. Now, I don't know if that's the future of banking or not, but if you live in that town in Poland, which bank do you want to go to? The thing I love about this example is that they didn't get the idea by studying other banks. They got the idea by looking at the success that Uber and Lyft were having with on-demand rides. They took that idea, borrowed it, and applied it to retail banking. So here's a technique I'd like you to consider. I'd like you to use. I like to call it the borrowed idea. In other words, if you're looking for a new source of inspiration, instead of looking inside of your existing industry, look outside. Maybe there's something happening in sports, or the arts, or entertainment, or nature, or technology, or fashion, or travel. Some totally different field. There may be a problem that you're facing that's being solved in a completely different way. You can take inspiration from outside of your field, borrow it, and apply it to what you're doing, and that may become the difference maker. The borrowed idea, a very powerful way to crave what's next. There's a gentleman here named, originally his name Carlos Sweeney. So he was born in my hometown of Detroit in a really tough environment, a very rough neighborhood. And in fact, he was abandoned by his parents as an infant. He grew up in foster care and unfortunately just in really terrible surroundings, abject poverty. He was passed from grade to grade in a failing school system, never learned to read. Well, by the 9th grade with few options and no real support system, he ends up dropping out and ends up getting involved in gangs and drugs and violence. By the time he was 16, he was both shot and stabbed. But age 20, a friend of his said something to him that changed his life. They said, hey man, all of the people you know, all the folks in your life are either in one of two areas. They're either dead or in jail. Well, that was the difference maker. And he said, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to crave what's next. I'm going to do something totally different with my future. So he made sort of a sharp left turn and got out of the gang, off the drugs, and tried to become a legitimate citizen. Took him a decade. Again, very few skills, no resources. He took any job that he could. He worked security, he worked construction, anything he could do to become a responsible, tax-paying citizen. Anyway, he ends up becoming successful. And not, private jets and yachts successful, but he was a responsible guy. But then here's the best part. He wanted to give back. As a kid, it taught him discipline when he was learning to box. So he ends up starting this thing called the Downtown Youth Boxing Gym in downtown Detroit. Now, it looks like a boxing gym on the surface, but it's really an educational facility masked as a boxing gym. Kids come for the lure of boxing, but they're not allowed to train in the ring until they spend a couple hours in the back room working with an academic coach, 6-7 days a week. They're taught that they matter, that they can do it, that they have a different path forward. Now, unfortunately today, in the couple mile square radius of this gym, there's an abysmal high school graduation rate of only 37%. It's tragic. But the kids that go through this program, through the Detroit Downtown Youth Boxing Gym, 100% high school graduation rate. So he's got this nonprofit now that's grabbing the attention of the world, that's making a real difference, and he's doing it because he's craving what's next. It's a totally different approach to academic success, to helping kids break the cycle of poverty. This is what happens when you get creative and you embrace these types of everyday innovations. All right, so this brings us to our third obsession of innovators. Obsession number 3, it's around defying traditions. Now, there are many traditions that can and should be upheld. There are family traditions, religious traditions, heck, college game day traditions. But traditions in our professional lives can be deadly. When we find ourselves just blindly doing things the way we've always done them, gosh, that's been the beginning of the end for far too many companies, far too many careers. Instead, my suggestion is, let's examine those traditions and ask ourselves, what would happen if we defied them? I learned recently that cycle racing is filled with traditions, also filled with a lot of rules and regulations. You can't just grab your Huffy and go ride it in the Tour de France. But there's a bike manufacturer named Specialized that decided to confront those traditions. At Specialized, they would always get asked the question, what would happen if you had no rules? Now, it turns out there's a governing body of cycle racing called the UCI. It stands for United Cycling International. So they said, well, what if they didn't have those rules? What could they do differently? So they started designing a concept bike, which they jokingly call the FUCI bike, which, as you can imagine, stands for F the UCI. So what they did is they decided to break every rule and invent a concept bike that was completely the opposite. They said, here's the FUCI. And the cool part about it is they used the rules, the constraints, as a source of inspiration. They made a list of each and every rule and wrote them down one side of the page. Next to each rule, they asked the question, what's the polar opposite? So for example, the rules clearly state that bike tires must be the same size. So they said, oh, that's a great idea. What if we made the back one larger to create more traction? The rules say, well, no engines on board. They say, wow, thanks so much for the inspiration. We're going to put a little engine in the crank of ours to give you a boost when you're going up hills. So one by one, they defy each and every tradition, and the rules themselves, the constraints, became their source of inspiration. What would happen if you made a list like that? If you listed out all the traditional approaches that you have to your professional life and just ask the question, what's the polar opposite? You may find some that are still perfect. Heck, don't change just for the sake of it. But you might find some that by flipping them upside down, you discover a better path forward. And here's a good way to remember it from a technique standpoint. When you find yourself about to do something in a traditional way, ask what would happen if you gave it a judo flip. Take that tradition, flip it upside down to yield a better path forward. Judo flip your tradition. Judo flip an opportunity. Judo flip a threat. Judo flip a challenge. It's that oppositional nature that can make all the difference in the world. An example, the airline industry, as you know, it's almost like identical. You hardly remember which airline you're on half the time. It's the identical experience, unless you happen to be in South Africa, flying a specialty airline called Kulula Airlines. Well, you might notice a slight difference. The folks at Kulula said there are certain things that we can't change. We can't change what we do for a living, flying people around in airplanes. But they said, are there other traditions that we could defy? In their case, they said, well, airlines generally take themselves pretty seriously. What if we had a little fun with things? So they decided to become an airline with a chuckle. Today, there's just no way you could confuse a Delta flight for a Kulula flight. Not going to happen. And they drive the sense of humor in every aspect, every customer touch point. They say funny things over the loudspeaker on the flights. They play practical jokes on you. Sometimes they even hide your luggage. But the funny part here is that not only are they having more fun, they're making more money. In an industry that until recently has been plagued with financial ruin, Kulula has enjoyed significant growth year over year for the last 15 years. For you, you may not make the same sense of humor your benchmark. I mean, what you do has to be authentic. But what I'm saying is that instead of becoming overwhelmed with the things that you can't control in your business, look for those that you can. Look for little areas, little traditions that you can flip upside down and in turn enjoying better results. Take a look at the donut. To me, the donut is the absolute symbol of a commodity. They are basically the same ingredients. They taste the same no matter where you go. They're unlimited supply at every donut shop, at every supermarket or gas station, and they're pretty much 50 cents a piece. Enter a man named Dominique Ansel. Now, Dominique is a French-trained pastry chef. He studied at the Culinary Institute in Paris. We started wondering, well, how come there's no innovation in donuts? Seems like a pretty big industry. What if we did something special? So Dominique set out to defy those traditions, to do something completely different. And he invented something called a cronut. The cronut is basically like if a donut and a croissant hooked up and had a love child. Well, that's a cronut. They come in funky flavors like strawberry marzipan and chocolate limoncello. He put a little layer of innovation on top of the everyday donut. Now here's the kicker. As I mentioned, typical donuts are 50 cents a piece. Well, these babies are $5. Now let's put our business hats on for a minute. His cost of goods sold didn't go up by tenfold. His marketing costs aren't tenfold higher. His printing and design costs aren't anymore. His facilities costs don't cost anymore. But now he's charging 10 times the price point. Well, you might say, look, he can charge anything he wants, but who's going to $5 donut? Well, this is his store in New York City. There's literally a line around the block 7 days a week. People will wait in line for up to an hour or more, often to be turned down, because Dominique has sold every cronut he's ever made. To my knowledge, in the history of the universe, I don't think anyone has ever waited in line for a boring glazed donut. I know it's a playful example, but I think it's an important one. In your business, what are you offering your customers? Are you just giving them a boring, same old donut solution, or are you giving them a cronut? If you're trying to recruit people, are you giving your new employees a cronut opportunity or the boring donut opportunity? In other words, that little layer of everyday innovation on top of what you're already doing can make all the difference in the world. It doesn't take 10 times more money, time, or resources, but it absolutely can yield 10 times more results. Well, this brings us now to our fourth obsession of innovators. Obsession number 4 may be my favorite as a kid who was born in the city of Detroit. Obsession number 4 is around getting scrappy. It's about doing more with less, drawing on internal resources rather than waiting around for external ones. In fact, this type of thinking, grit, determination, tenacity, resilience, this has been the great equalizer. This is why startups are able to win against industry giants. Now, of all things, I started my own career as a jazz guitarist. And interestingly enough, I studied music in college. I had a professor that would force me to remove strings from the instrument. He would make me take off 1, 2, sometimes 3 strings from the guitar. Well, you figure, okay, your resources have now been cut in half. Clearly, your creativity is going to suffer. But a surprising and counterintuitive thing happened. When those strings were off, I could no longer rely on the patterns that I knew. I had to solve musical problems in a totally different way. And as a result, instead of my creativity suffering, my creativity actually soared. In your case, like for us all, there's never enough money or time or bandwidth or computing power or talent. But in the inevitable resource-constrained environments, those are real opportunities to shine by doubling down on your own gifts of creativity, by getting scrappy. That's what happened in this case for a guy named Bo Coffin. Now, Bo was an average guy with an average job. He didn't have any fancy degrees, didn't have a big payroll, and he was actually facing a personal challenge. The personal challenge is he was trying to get his 2 young children to eat healthier. Now, this is very difficult to do in a fast food world. Now, again, he didn't have a lot of resources or any type of backing or training, but he got scrappy. He said, there's got to be a way to make something better for my kids. Well, turns out his daughter was in love with American Girl dolls. It was her passion. So one day she goes to school, she opens up her lunch and discovers this. He made a bento box lunch out of his daughter's love for American Girl dolls. Well, daughter comes home, gives Bo the hug of a lifetime. Well, this case, he knew he was onto something. So the next day, he made another one. Well, now the kids love it. They start freaking out. All of his kids' friends start saying, I want one of these too. So he makes another one. Before long, the parents are calling, teachers are calling. This is the greatest thing. It's so cool. Your kids are helping our kids eat healthy. They want one of these too. So he keeps making them. A friend says to him, Bo, you got to share this with the world. So with no skills, no money, they launch a free website using WordPress, and they call it lunchboxdad.com. They start sharing the recipes, spend no money in marketing, and the thing takes off. Before long, hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world are coming to this site. Now, out of nowhere, he makes no sales calls. Major brands around the globe start calling Bo. Hey, Bo, can we advertise on your site? Can we put our brand next to yours? So with no capital, no resources, Bo launches an e-commerce business, lunchboxdad.com. He's been able to leave his day job. He's serving the world. He's helping his kids, having a lot of fun. And it all happened by getting scrappy. He solved a complex problem in a non-traditional way. He doubled down on his own creativity, rather than waiting around for external support or external resources. Which brings us now to our fifth and final obsession of innovators. And after we conclude this last obsession, I would be delighted to answer any questions that you may have. Obsession number 5 is around adapting fast. We often think that innovation can only happen as a giant lightning bolt from above, and after that, it's just mindless execution. Truth is, the real building blocks of innovation have nothing to do with that giant lightning bolt. More often than not, ideas are flawed. The building blocks, in fact, are your ability to adapt, pivot, flip things around, change it up, innovate little things in real time. So for you, take the weight of the world off your shoulders. You don't have to invent some game-changing idea tomorrow. It's much more important of the rapid-fire innovation, running lots of little experiments all the time. It's more critical how quickly you adapt than how potent your initial ideas may be. Los Angeles, California, where I happen to be today. A billboard goes up. Your move, BMW, the entirely new Audi A4. I think the whole point of this ad is, it was a rhetorical question. I mean, come on, there's just no way that BMW could possibly respond to such a cool new car. But BMW, well, they're an innovative company. They know how to adapt fast. Within only 1 week, in the identical sightline to this billboard, BMW fired back with this. So I'm guessing that's not what Audi was hoping for. But Audi is also an innovative company. So instead of crying about it or bringing in their lawyers, 2 days later, very next billboard, Audi responds, your pawn is no match for our king. Well, this launched the billboard wars of LA. Both companies kept running more and more ads trying to outdo one another. And frankly, both companies won because they both knew how to adapt fast. I do have to say it got kind of weird after a while. But at the end of the day, Audi wins. And here's why. The last series of billboards didn't come from their ad agency, came from their customers. Audi had the idea to open it up on social media, and thousands of ideas flooded in via Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, many of which were turned into live billboards. Can you imagine for a second engaging your own customers so much that they're writing your ads for you? But the best part here is that's not what Audi set out to do. Audi had a whole different idea in mind that backfired. But because they applied this adapt fast creativity, they were able to flip a tragedy into a triumph. And you can do the same. One last story that I believe embodies all 5 of these core principles. This is a guy named Kos Marta. And Kos, as you can see here, was in a tough spot. So Kos was born in abject poverty in New York. And he actually lived below the poverty line growing up as a kid. And he really wanted a better life for himself, but there were few options. And he ended up getting involved in drugs and the drug trade. He started smoking marijuana at age 11, started dealing at age 13. Well, by age 19, he actually built a successful business. He was doing about $2 million in drug sales and he had about 20 employees. But as you can imagine, he had a regulatory challenge. Federal agents swarmed, he was sent to prison. Now, Kos was in a tough spot, but he really wanted a better life for himself. He didn't want to end up as a criminal for the rest of his life, and he wanted to create a better situation. But what could he do? He had to figure out a new path forward, and he had to use these 5 obsessions of innovators to help him get there. So first, he had to get curious. He started asking all kinds of questions to himself about what are the possibilities, what could he do differently, so he didn't fall into the same trap of so many around him. He had to crave what's next as he sat there in his prison cell. And in fact, for 3 weeks, he was in solitary confinement, thinking about nothing else than doing something legitimate when he got out. He had to defy tradition. The traditional approaches for ex-cons was very limited, could hardly get work. He had to get scrappy. I mean, this guy didn't have any resources to name. And he had to adapt fast. I mean, once he got out of prison, he has a very short runway before he ran into real problems. Well, it turns out that when he was in prison, he actually entered prison very overweight. And with nothing else to do, especially in solitary confinement, he decided to commit his energies to exercising. And in solitary confinement with no equipment, he developed a workout system for himself to only using his own body weight. And he was able to lose 70 pounds in 6 months. After he got out of solitary confinement, he started training others out in the yard and such on how to do fitness for themselves. And this actually led to his opportunity. So he thought to himself, is there a way to create a fitness program, a fitness company when he gets out of prison? Well, first, actually, he was just trying to get a job and no one would hire him. As you can imagine, very few people are willing to take a chance, to give a second chance to an ex-con. So instead of being able to get a job, he decided to start his own company. And this took him a while. It took him a while to raise some money. It took him a while to even find a landlord to give him a lease. But he started something called ConBody. ConBody is a fitness program that is the same fitness program that he developed. And he actually developed this whole fitness concept around a prison theme. So in the Lower East Side of New York, you go down this dark elevator and you enter the waiting room of ConBody. Looks kind of like a prison. Inside, you see a faux prison gate, and you're entered into your training program, which uses no weights. They like to say this ain't no soul cycle. No equipment, just using your own body. And the whole thing, they actually call the members of the gym, they call them inmates. And the members actually have some fun with it. They create Instagram photos and all kinds of fun, even in selling apparel. Now, the people that work there, not only did Koss want to give a second chance to people trying to get healthier, and of course he embraced a second chance for himself, he gives second chances to fellow ex-inmates. The entire staff that he has now of about 12 people are all ex-felons. And those are the same people that are the personal trainers and that work at the desk and help clean up the gym. As I mentioned, the inmates, the members, really have fun with this, and they embrace this gritty sense of workout. Well, this gym takes off. Today, Koss has 10,000 members paying their monthly dues, and in fact, he's even opened it up online, and people can subscribe monthly, even if you can't get to his gym. And he has thousands of people around the world using his fitness program in 22 countries. And his next facility, of course, he started this one, could barely get a lease anywhere, and he's in this dingy place in the Lower East Side. Well, he's just about to open his new one in the middle of Saks Fifth Avenue. His notion took off so much that Saks, one of the most elegant retailer, is embracing his concept, and they're building a little ConBody thing inside Saks Fifth Avenue in which they help train people and sell apparel. So Koss was able to take his horrible situation of tragedy and poverty, of incarceration and hopelessness, flip it upside down using these 5 principles of Innovators, and changed the game for himself, for his employees, and for his thousands of members. If Koss can do that in the worst possible environment we can imagine, think what you can do with the resources at your disposal. So before we wrap up, I just want to share this resource with you. If you'd like to learn more about this type of thinking, get some free resources that you can download, watch a number of cool videos, I've put together a webpage for you. Just visit my website, joshlinkner.com/go, password Allegra, and you'll find a whole bunch of free resources that you can use to support your own creative journey, your own ability to scale and to innovate. And finally, on behalf of the great folks at Allegra, I'd like to leave you with an innovation challenge. While these ideas are still fresh in your mind, in the next 7 days, see if you can uncover just one single idea for creative disruption. It doesn't have to be big, it can be something little. And by the way, you don't have to do it next week or fund it or execute it. Just think of it. Here's what's going to happen. Ideas are contagious. One idea becomes 6 ideas, becomes 11 ideas. And this new creative groove will spill over to those around you, your customers, your employees, your partners. If you give yourself permission to let one idea come to the surface next week, what you're going to find is that can be the spark that you need, the beginning of momentum that becomes unstoppable. We were hardwired to think this way as human beings. Let's bring those skills back to the surface. The very skills that we had as kids of creative wonder, of imagination, that can become the most powerful weapon in our professional lives. I'll say this, the stakes in business have never been higher. The threats have never been greater. The competition has never been more fierce. But I really think we are living in times that provide unprecedented opportunity. So let's seize them. Let's embrace these principles of innovation. Let's make sure that we are getting ahead of the game. Let's make sure that we are getting curious, that we are craving what's next, that we are defying tradition, that we are adapting fast, that we're getting scrappy. And if we can do that, like Koss, like many of the other folks that we've shared here today, I think our best days will be yet to come. Folks, thank you so much. It's been a privilege to share these ideas with you, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions.
Wow, thank you so much, Josh. Appreciate all of those great messages. I'm certainly inspired to find ways to get scrappy and do some judo flips. We have had some questions come in. The first is around nonprofits. And so how can innovation and being a disruptor be adopted to nonprofits with a social justice cause?
Great question. Thank you for asking that. So in the example of the Detroit boxing gym, I think, we saw that where he took an innovative approach to a nonprofit problem, which is helping kids read, and was able to use creativity to do it in a non-traditional way. And funny enough, and I've written about this for years, I've studied many other nonprofits that have helped make a real impact using these principles. Ironically, while I didn't have time to share it, the only way that guy Koss Marte was able to launch his gym is he got funding from a nonprofit called Defying Ventures. It's a thing in New York that they set up a venture capital fund to help provide resources to ex-felons to give them a path forward with entrepreneurship. And they provide not only capital, but lots of coaching. And literally, that was the reason that guy was able to start his business, is because of the great work of this nonprofit in New York. So I think that if we take the lens of innovation and apply it directly to the great and noble work that people are doing in nonprofits, we can create amazing outcomes. In this case, the outcome isn't profit. The outcome is making a real impact in those around us.
Thanks, Josh. We have another question from someone that is sharing that they're currently in more of an administrative role or kind of serving as an office manager. And while they love these ideas and they want to take a more innovative approach, what are some ways that they can get their manager or their boss on board with this type of thinking?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing is you have to sort of make the case for it. So if you come in to a boss and like, hey, dude, let's be all creative, they're going to just call security. Instead, I think the way to approach it is saying, let's look at some examples of what happens when people don't embrace this type of thinking. Let's look what happened to Blockbuster or A&P or Pan Am Airlines or Oldsmobile. Like I said earlier, that it's so risky just standing with the status quo, even though it feels safe. And we try to live our lives trying to play it safe, only to discover that playing it safe has become one of the riskiest things that we can do. So I think the first thing we need to do is make the case for change. The second thing we need to do for any boss is to make it easy to say yes. If you're like, hey, can I just have a blank check and unlimited time to go be creative in an art studio? Again, no way. The way to break that down is set up, if you have an idea, set it up as an experiment, a prototype, a fixed amount of time and a fixed amount of money. So if you ask for a blank check, you're never going to get it. If you say, listen, I've got an idea and here's the way I'm going to test it. I need $200 in 1 week. Can I have that to test the idea? And only will double down on it if I can prove out some initial results. So if you think of innovation as lots of little rapid experiments that are controlled in time and controlled in money, rather than one big scary bet the farm initiative, it de-risks the process and the opportunity to be innovative. So again, number one, make the case for change. And number two, take away the risk by breaking down big ideas into little teeny experiments that are much more palatable to those around us.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Josh. We had a couple questions about will a copy of this webinar be emailed to attendees? And the answer is yes. You will be receiving an email this week with a link to today's recorded webinar. So check your inbox this week. And again, feel free to share this information with friends, colleagues, or family. We also had a question about how Allegra can kind of help be more innovative and help clients with their challenges. And the answer is we think that we can help you in many ways, and very similar to Josh's message, we too are obsessed with being disruptors and coming up with innovative solutions for our clients, whether that's to generate brand awareness, retain and grow existing customers or donors, acquire a new business, or engage and motivate internal employees. It's why we're hosting today's webinar, because we believe in sharing educational content with our customers and potential customers. It's why we publish an award-winning Marketing Insider magazine, sharing best practices and case studies, because we truly do care about our clients' success, and we want to provide them with the tools and the resources to make their jobs easier and ultimately drive better results. If you need some help in coming up with new creative ideas, or you just need someone to help look at things a little bit differently for you or your business, let us know. The team at Allegra is certainly prepared to help you drive better results with all types of innovative and creative ideas, and I promise we'll have lots of fun working together. So we don't have any other questions that have come in, so I'll leave you with kind of an overview of all the ways that we can work together. If you're not currently working with local Allegra, you can go to allegramarketingprint.com and find the Allegra closest to you. I'd like to thank Josh again for sharing all of his great insights with all of us today. Appreciate your time, Josh. Thanks everyone for joining us, and have an awesome day.
Thanks so much.